There are some people that are fighting on the ground, and my good friend Jim Karahalios is one of those people. You might remember him. He ran in the leadership for the Conservative Party of Canada. He was unceremoniously dismissed, and he has an incredible story in politics, and he's also been overcoming some physical challenges, but that does not keep a good man down. So Jim Karahalios, we just want to welcome you to the show. Thank you very much. You're in the background there waiting. Hey, how are you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good, you look great. Is this some kind of new background you got going on?
We're trying to put the new blue banner up behind us here and set it up nicely. You got a great studio yourself, a great setup. So we can't keep up with you, Laura-Lynn, but we're trying our best.
Oh, it's so good to see you. I really like that. And you're basically now the leader of the new Blue Party of Ontario, right?
That's right. That's right. So it's been a couple years since I think we talked on your show, and it's great to see you going live. But I think the last time we spoke was the double DQ in the Conservative leadership race, when I was in third place, hot on the heels of Aaron O'Toole. And the Conservative Party of Canada kicked me out of that leadership, and we had to go to court. And we got back on the ballot, and the next day they kicked us out one more time. And a couple months later, my wife, who's the provincial MPP, member of provincial parliament in Cambridge in Ontario, she voted against Doug Ford's, she was part of the PC government. She was the junior minister on the file that brought in the lockdown bill in Ontario. So we're talking back in June of 2020, over a year ago now, and she voted against that bill that Doug Ford put forward, stripping all the MPP's rights. She got kicked out of his caucus, and then a group of us 19 got kicked out of the PC party. And a couple months later, we co-founded the New Blue Party of Ontario, and we've been building it ever since, with some health challenges in between, like you mentioned, but we're a few months away from June and getting things up and running. How's the quality, by the way, Laura-Lynn? Can you hear me over
Oh,
there?
the quality is fantastic. You look amazing and you sound amazing. And I'm so glad to see you looking so well. You've been through a lot. Um, you know, uh, I think it's sad that you got kicked out of the Conservative Party of Canada, but I bet you're seeing now that all things work together for good, because you're able to take the knowledge that you have. I mean, if we could just talk about the Conservative Party of Canada, you're very well versed in what's going on there, but we just feel that there's no opposition. You know, in the U.S., you see people like the Republicans standing against the stupidity of Biden, but the Trudeau era seems to have everybody on board with what he's doing. We've got, you know, Aaron O'Toole basically all masked all the time, pretty much not saying a word, you know, against these vaccine mandates. He does a little bit, but he does nothing concrete.
So there's a difference in the political systems that allows the parties like federally, the Conservative Party of Canada, and provincially, the Ontario PC Party. There's a difference in the systems. In the US, those primaries, from what I understand, I'm not an expert on primaries in the US, but they're protected by law, and every citizen has the right to enter into a primary for the Democratic Party, the Republican Party, if you meet certain requirements. In our system, Laura-Lynn, in Canada, the political parties largely have operated like little clubs, private clubs, for over 100 years. And so when you get someone like me running in a Conservative leadership race, and the guys in the back have a design and they want Aaron O'Toole to win, and they've cut deals with the other candidates in the race, and someone like me is able to, they put up the barrier, $300,000 to get on the ballot, and they thought, oh, Jim's never gonna reach that barrier. And we had a great campaign in a couple months, and we were at $400,000 in donations in 6 weeks. We're in third place, and they panicked, and they even put a saboteur on our team that was spying for Aaron O'Toole's campaign, and unfortunately Derek Sloan's campaign, and they had no other choice but to kick us out. And that's the system in Canada right now. It's the destruction of the political party system, provincially and federally, where a small group of individuals in the back of these parties can block people from running in nominations and leaderships that they believe are a threat that they believe have too much support. And with one decision, you could just oust them right out of not only just caucus, but right out of the party. So it's a very different system. And it's not a right or left problem, it's a top-down problem where, the small group of lobbyists in the back of the Conservative Party of Canada and Ontario PC Party, and there's some overlap there, they want to keep tight reins on their party. And if you become a threat and you get a following and you're good at campaigning, you have some truthful things to say, you want to challenge the status quo, they don't want that. And the only option for my wife, Belinda, who's the MPP in Cambridge, and I, provincially, we heard people loud and clear saying you need to start another party because we don't have anyone to vote for. There is no fixing the Ontario PC Party from the inside. It's even further far gone than what you've seen with the Conservative Party of Canada, Laura-Lynn.
Wow. And that's saying a lot, because all of it just seems a lot of people losing faith in the whole political system, because it seems like the bad guys keep winning, and we keep seeing it, all the way from Trudeau keep getting in. But if people are bought off, and if it's kind of fixed, and if you can't get good candidates in because they get iced out, which is exactly, it's happened to me before from the Conservative Party of Canada, and it happened to you with the Conservative Party of Canada, and then it's happening in provincial levels as well. So we're really facing quite a crisis. So what is different about the New Blue Ontario Party?
Well, they want people to believe that all hope is lost. That's what they want the voters to believe, because at the end of the day, the small groups that are running each of the parties, they're outnumbered, Laura-Lynn, and they know that. And so if the things that Belinda and I have been saying, and the things that people on the ground want and the grassroots want in Ontario, if they weren't at a critical mass, if they weren't able to influence change by the numbers or win elections, we wouldn't be in the position we're in today. They wouldn't have sued me. The Ontario PC Party sued me in 2017 to try to silence my campaign against the carbon tax that they were in favor of, and against vote rigging that was going on in the Ontario PC Party. They wouldn't have done that. And I won in 6 weeks. They tried to bankrupt me in court, and I won when a judge threw it out and said there was no merit to the lawsuit. I ran for PC president provincially on a campaign to clean up the operations of the PC Party. They rigged it at the convention. And then the leadership we talked about, they kicked me out twice in the same leadership. And then they kicked, on the provincial side, they kicked Belinda and me and 17 others out of the Ontario PC Party. And Belinda was the only elected politician across Canada, provincially or federally, to get kicked out of a caucus for voting against a piece of lockdown legislation. She's the only one, and she was the first one in Ontario and the only current or former PC MPP to vote against Doug Ford's lockdown bill. And she knew where this was going. And so why I'm telling you all this is because they wouldn't go to those efforts, Laura-Lynn, if they thought, he doesn't have a lot of support, Belinda doesn't have a lot of support, there's nothing there. They wouldn't go to those efforts. They would just leave people like that in the parties. They know they would say, they're going to lose on the ballot, but they know they're outnumbered. They know they're offside with grassroots voters on the right side of the spectrum and anti-liberal voters across Canada, and in Ontario, it's the same case. And so the New Blue Party is the only option, and we're building a party for over a year now, and it's going really well, Laura-Lynn. We had on New Year's Eve, the donations came in as the last day that you could donate in 2021 for the New Blue Party of Ontario. And we were so surprised, so pleasantly surprised. It was our best day of fundraising in my 16 years of politics with any campaign I'd been involved in. Our prior best day was in that Conservative leadership after I was on Evan Solomon, CTV and CBC News, and did my best to stand up to them in mainstream media interviews. And the day after, in that Conservative leadership race, people from across Canada went online to make sure I hit the $300,000. And just a few days ago on New Year's Eve, Laura-Lynn, we did way better than I did on that day in the leadership. And people are hungry for a change. And we're developing, look, we're being very clear what we're about. The color blue in Canada, not like the US, which represents the Democrats, but in Canada and the rest of the world, the color blue is right of center. It's a right of center party. We're the New Blue. We're not hiding it. We're not running under a banner of an ambiguous name, pretending that we're something for everyone. No, if you're in favor of establishment policies, if you're on the left side of the spectrum, in Ontario, you've got the Green Party, you've got the NDP, you've got the Liberals, You've got probably a half dozen other small parties that have been around for a few years. What's missing in Ontario is a right of center party that stands up for fiscal sanity, stands up against the social reengineering of provincial politics in Ontario, stands up against corruption of the political system and anti-democratic forces that are running the establishment parties, and stands up for small business owners, individual workers, faith and churches, and allows and stands up for parents. And that's what we're developing with the New Blue Party. And we've come a long way in just over a year, and things are going really, really well. And the election's coming up in June in Ontario. And we're a threat, Laura-Lynn, and they're throwing everything at us.
That's why I'm really glad to hear actually that you've had some problems, because if nobody pays any attention to you, it's because you're not a threat, and you truly are. And I also know that you understand Canada, you understand grassroots Canadian values. And I think that we are finally, maybe, because I don't want to be so negative, but maybe we are finally beginning to see a certain group rising up, because now we've seen that a lot of liberalism has affected our entire, our communities, our country. And a lot of people now saying, I do want those values to be maintained. And maybe we didn't consider that it was necessary, but all of a sudden we've seen Canada go progressively to the left in extreme ways, led by our Prime Minister, and it just trickles on down. And you're doing something new, and I think that's very positive. People are hungry for that.
Well, all politics is local, Laura-Lynn, and we can't forget, with all of the material that's out there and the global forces, all politics are local. And so one of the concerns I have is when we talk about the global influence on Canadian politics, it really gives someone like Doug Ford the excuse, right, Laura-Lynn? Because if we just conclude that it's all the same all around the world, which is not true, like you could look at Ron DeSantis in Florida, even across Canada, you see variations in what's going on, and the worst right now is in Quebec and Ontario. But the way you approach these problems is different throughout the world. But if we just say, well, it's some mysterious figure behind the scenes, you're really walking into the trap that Doug Ford and the PCs behind the PCs want, because what they want is to go onto the June election, and they want Ontario to say, well, it wasn't Doug's fault. This is coming from a higher place, and he's just powerless. He's just the premier, Laura-Lynn. He can't do anything. In fact, he's the premier, Laura-Lynn. He's the most powerful person in Ontario, and he's responsible for the decisions that are being made. And there's others out there that want to use the excuses, poor guy, he's just getting bad advice, or, we just need to get the right people around Doug Ford. No, it's not about some secret figure in the back. Everything is out there for you to read. Who has Doug Ford's ear, how they treat the MPPs in caucus, and how rotten the Ontario PC party is, and how they act in leaderships and at conventions. And if we keep just talking about global forces and ignore local politics, it feeds into the people running the system provincially in Ontario in a top-down manner and shutting down the average voter and diminishing the rights that we have as Ontario citizens. So we like to focus on what's going on locally. And we're in provincial politics, and that's where our focus is.
So locally going on, can you give me a picture of what it looks like to be under the COVID measures and restrictions that are going on right now?
Well, I was telling you that we ended 2021 on a high note with the New Blue Party, and people were really excited. And then, Doug Ford ruined it within a few days. And Belinda and I are getting messages either from the party side, and she's getting it from her office or constituency office. Very sad stories outside of Cambridge, right across the province, of people losing their education and losing their jobs and their careers. And then also not being able to take their kids to activities as a result of these passport measures that are being put in place. And, it's affected us personally as well. I mean, we haven't been affected to the same extent in terms of, being employed by someone who tells you you're fired if you don't compromise. But Belinda refuses to abide by a passport requirement. In the legislature in Ontario, the speaker just made a rule without a vote back in October that you can't get in if you're an MPP unless you use the passport, or you do testing. And she got a positive COVID test. And then he made up a rule when she got better. Public Health sent her a notice saying you can go back to work. But the speaker in the Ontario legislature made up his own rules, even more draconian than Public Health. Can you believe it? Like, I can't believe the Ontario PC MPPs think more draconian than Public Health bureaucrats in Ontario. But he said 90 days, you can't come. But she was able to get a negative test. She showed up at the legislature. And they kicked her out. I couldn't believe it. 100-pound woman. My wife is lovely. They kicked her right out of the legislature. And then they ran to the media to discredit her by making up a story. She's unvaccinated. They don't know that. She just refuses to use her passport. Belinda's taken a very principled position. It's none of your business if I get the vaccine or not. And we've also been impacted because when you don't want to use the passport, our son was in local sports. He wasn't allowed to attend, which obviously upset him. And we've been struggling with that, but it doesn't compare to the people that we've heard losing their jobs, losing their careers, not knowing how they're going to feed their families, losing their educations. And we hear it from both sides because in the sense that what we think is a large portion of the majority don't like being asked, that they have to disclose their status. And the unfortunate thing is the polarizing narrative of the debate and these terrible articles we're seeing in the Toronto Star and their local newspapers where they're vilifying people for either not using the passport or taking other choices. And it's really disgusting because it really inflames and douses like an inflammatory thing across the population where people are attacking each other for their own personal choices. And really, like, you just remember a couple of years ago, no one asked what, the health choices that we each took. I got COVID after Belinda, and I went down to Hamilton, St. Joseph's Hospital, Laura-Lynn. I bet you didn't know this. Hamilton at St. Joseph's Hospital in Hamilton, there's a monoclonal antibody treatment that Ron DeSantis is using across Florida quite successfully. And we didn't know. Nobody in Ontario knew that this had arrived to Ontario or Canada. And there was one doctor there. He struggled for 3 months to get, Dr. Chagla, I think is his name, struggled with the government for 3 months to get monoclonal antibodies here. I went down on the third day. They said, I had been doing chemo, had 3 major surgeries in the last year, reconstructive leg surgery. I lost bone and muscle. And they said, yeah, you're a good candidate. So I went and did it. Within a couple of days, I was back on my feet. It was fantastic. And he only had about 50 people that had gone for this treatment. And we're sitting there and wondering, why isn't this treatment available right across Ontario? So the people that are vulnerable, people that are more vulnerable than me, who have serious comorbidities can get this treatment. And it wasn't happening in Ontario. And I spoke out about it. And now we're seeing some articles and they're easing the restrictions for Ontarians to be able to access this treatment. But it's, here we are 2 years later, and it's all about the jab, but they're not expanding on the use of these treatments. And these are public doctors, doctors in the public healthcare system that are saying this stuff works. It's not something, offline that the government can just dismiss.
DeSantis says it's saved thousands and thousands of lives, and it should be everywhere.
And, I'm happy that I went to do the treatment because I started talking about it in some interviews. We posted it on social media, and not coincidentally, within a few weeks, we're seeing articles come out about the monoclonal antibody treatment, that they're reducing the, the qualifications or the standards to receive that treatment. And so what we've seen with the New Blue Party is when we have a cohesive effort and a unified front challenging the narrative of the establishment parties and Doug Ford and the PCs, we get movement. We get movement on files. But right now we're in a bad spot because Doug Ford has gone backwards. And
what's with him? Nobody understands him. He should have been a rock star, eh? But he hasn't. He's been nothing but a disappointment literally since the moment he got in.
Well, you were following it, and you're right. It was from the moment. I mean, even before COVID, it was a few months after he got rid of cap and trade. He followed the message of the Axe the Carbon Tax campaign I ran, he followed that. And then right after that, we went into a PC convention, and the staff at PC headquarters and the Ontario government rigged the convention there against the hundreds of delegates that paid hundreds of dollars to attend and vote. They rigged it against them so they could keep control of the party. And I knew something was wrong. I knew. And it really took COVID to open up a lot of people's eyes. But he is getting a lot of, he has the brand. He has the Ford name. And it was built by not Doug Ford. It was built by Rob Ford. And Rob Ford's hard work and the abuse he took, because he stayed on principle, and he was a good man. He had his own demons, but politically he was solid on the issues. Doug Ford is not his brother. Doug Ford is not his brother. Rob told me my brother's a pinko, and I should have listened to him. And we all wanted to give him a second chance, because in Ontario we had McGuinty win for 15 years, and he was saying all the right things, but he was deceiving everyone because he doesn't actually believe in it. And whether it's incompetence or whether it's just deception or whether he's just incapable, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter, Laura-Lynn. And the reality of the situation is, even if you didn't have Doug Ford, the alternatives in the Ontario PC party aren't much better, Laura-Lynn. They're actually probably worse. Whether it's Christine Elliott or Rod Phillips, they will never allow someone who wants to represent Ontarians to lead the Ontario PC party, because it's been hijacked by left-wing ideologues and lobbyists that run that party, and they will rig, lie, cheat, and steal to get their way every single time. So it's not just a Doug Ford problem. Other politicians that want to save the PC party will tell you it's a Doug Ford problem, Laura-Lynn. Don't be fooled, because we got the battle scars to prove it. We've tried to change it from the inside. It's not workable.
Right, and I'm I'm really glad you see that, because a lot of people do try to stay with the party endlessly, when there is actually no hope of improving it from the inside, and that's happening for a lot of areas. I wish we had a standout premier somewhere in this country that actually spoke, and I appreciate you. I appreciate your integrity, your character, that you are a straight up guy. I know that politics is a minefield. I get that now. It is a minefield of egos, a minefield of lies, deception, and winning above everything else. The good of the people, it's just above, it's about winning. And it's very upsetting, and there are very nasty things that are employed in the political landscape that I hope we don't see in other places, but life is life. But I appreciate that you are always standing, you speak from a place of principle, and it would be amazing to see you in a place of leadership, as it would to see some people that we've seen stand out at certain times, but no one with power. We don't have a Ron DeSantis. We don't have somebody, Governor, is it Newsom from Texas? Or who am I saying, JT? The Texas guy. Yeah, Abbott. Right. Not Newsom's a bad guy, right? Okay, I get them confused. So we don't have the guys that we would love to support, cheer on, and that we could scream and yell and just be so completely thrilled, with what's going on. And Canada, we're wondering, we kind of feel like a takeover's already happened in a way, starting with Prime Minister Trudeau all the way down. Where is the conservative value voice? Where is it? Where's the power in it? There's none. And Aaron O'Toole is just such a huge disappointment.
Well, there's a lot of actors in the back behind the scenes that the people don't get to see. And there's a lot of money involved in politics in those leadership races. And now we've got political parties getting taxpayer subsidies, big money, millions of dollars going to the Ontario PC party, the Ontario Liberals, the Ontario NDP, to fund their political operations and to hire pollsters and lobbyists to do consulting and unfortunately a lot of deception in politics. But it's not. It doesn't take. One voice can make a difference, Laura-Lynn, is what I'm saying. And so we've got Belinda, in Ontario as the MPP. They've done everything they can to silence
And
her.
she
They
is
tried
a
to.
rock star. She is. She is standing up like nobody's business. I'm so glad. You guys are a power political couple and you're doing it together, and she is awesome. I'm so blessed to hear of all that she does. It makes me laugh because she's tough.
Well, it's amazing seeing, in 3 years how she's jumped into it. And I asked, and I look, thank you for the compliment. We're uncomfortable with that type of praise because we're just being accountable to the people that support us in the New Blue Party, our donors and our members, and the thousands of people who supported us in whenever we put our name on a ballot, and we're accountable to them. And we want to do things on the straight up. It's amazing how they shake in their boots at Queen's Park when she asks a question, because she's challenging them on everything, not just lockdown legislation. She's challenging them on taxpayer subsidies to funnel and run political parties, on green energy policies that are a disaster, on the hydro rates, on the budget, on the lack of tax relief that the Ford government. Basically, they're just doing the McGuinty-Wynne liberal agenda. And we're not the only ones to say it, those that follow it. And she challenges them across the board on all files. And it drives them nuts because,
It really does.
they weren't expecting it from her. And it's not just, as much as I like the compliment, Laura-Lynn, saying we're a power couple, we're really fueled by the people behind us. Because when we put out an action item, they pick up the phone and they call the PC MPPs and they get them to reverse course. And now that Doug Ford clamped down and he's going backwards just a couple of days ago, today actually was the first day of the measures that came in Ontario. You could see PC MPPs are feeling the heat, and they're out there and they're sending messages and emails saying, oh, but look at this other great thing I'm doing, because they're really feeling the heat. And Belinda's got a really good chance, Laura-Lynn, to get reelected in Cambridge. And we need to get her reelected in Cambridge so we have one person going to Queen's Park in Ontario on the right side of the spectrum, fighting against the corruption, fighting against anti-democratic forces, and fighting against this insanity on the lockdown, which isn't fixing anything, and all the other policies. We need her to get reelected, but we've also got thousands of donors and members. We've got riding associations registered in over 100 ridings, and we've got the applications are flooding in. Our first candidate application deadline is January 20th, so in 15 days. And we'll have a second deadline if there's ridings that are still open. But we're going to have a good slate of candidates, and I'm hoping candidates in every riding. And we're going to be a threat in June. And I don't like to predict the future, but we're doing our best to hang in there. So we just remain accountable, Laura-Lynn, to the people behind us. And I know people want a savior from the top to fly in and, like you said, some kind of political leader that will balance the narrative. That's not happening because the Ontario PC Party and the federal CPC are being controlled by a handful of backroom boys in the back, a little network. They like to call themselves a family. And if you don't cut a deal with them, they're not going to let you get involved. And if you're a threat and you call them out on their baloney, they don't like it. They get really upset. They attack you on Twitter, and they do deceptive deals with other politicians. But we're as strong as the people that support us, Laura-Lynn. We announced our party October, Thanksgiving weekend of 2020. And by December, I got diagnosed with bone cancer in my leg. And when I was going through the chemo and the surgeries, Laura-Lynn, it always runs in your mind, like, is this it? Is this done? On many levels? But even politically, it's going to take me a while to get better. Maybe the people that wanted a political party will move on. Maybe they just, maybe the New Blue was for them in 2020 of October. And by the time I get better, they'll say, okay, we don't want that anymore. And some people out there, yeah, they said I moved on to something else, and that's okay. But thousands of people waited for me to get back on my feet, waited for me to be walking again without an aid. And we're very grateful for all that support. We don't take any donation. We don't take any vote for granted. And we're only as strong as the people that know us and support us. And we just keep building. And the people will tell us when it's over.
Well, I know you're as strong as the people that support you, but you are extremely strong. You were strong before you got this cancer in your leg. And there's nothing like a trial of your body and your health to make you understand the gravity of life and how important it is what we do, how we change things. And so you've been through this next fire, but you were already strong. You were one of the strongest candidates in the bid for the leadership of the Conservative Party, so strong that you were such a huge threat they just had to get rid of you. And now you just keep coming back, Jim, and I just pray that the day is coming when it will be your day, and a day for you to input the ideas that the grassroots love and the strength that we need, because we're not seeing it. I mean, tyranny is overtaking Canada. I'm sure you had a lot of time to sit there and to contemplate the state of our nation, and it's actually quite terrifying at this time. And I'm glad you're there. Final thoughts.
Well, I'm flattered, Laura-Lynn. Thank you. I would just say that there's a difference between being strong in a leadership and having the strength to keep going in other areas of life. And I learned the difference when I was sick. And I could tell you that in many ways, I already feel like we're doing, and Belinda would probably say the same, we're already doing what we're supposed to be doing, regardless of an outcome in June. Most of our supporters say, look, we're gonna support you regardless of how the votes line up, because what you're doing is the right thing to do. And they keep saying this to us, and similar sentiments, and it keeps us on the path. And yes, of course, we'd like Belinda to get reelected, and I'd like to win when I run in the seat, and we'd like to get as many people elected as possible. But we're already doing what we're meant to do, which is call out these guys in the establishment parties for their baloney, call out other actors, and the thousands of people behind us and others that support us and want us to keep going. They're the ones that are fueling it. And we're already doing the work. We're already calling out Doug Ford. We've only got 4 months until June for the next election. We're way ahead in terms of setting up this party. And this is a long-term project for us. We're getting people on the ground in every riding across Ontario. And we're going to create a party in Canada that's a grassroots party fighting for common sense values and principles, and fighting against anti-democratic forces and calling out the deception from these establishment forces. And we're going to do that starting in Ontario. So I want to say thank you to all the people that support us across Canada and in Ontario. And the best is yet to come, Laura-Lynn. I firmly believe that. And if anyone watching your show wants to run for the New Blue in June, it's newblueontario.com. Click on that link to run and do that application. And the first deadline is January 20th.
Yeah, I think we had actually pulled up your, we want to give that a good plug. So if people want to actually run for your party, this is great. So it's New Blue, say that again.
newblueontario.com.
newblueontario.com.
Link there. There's a link there that says run at the top.
Okay.
You got to get the web person to,
all right,
web guy to do that right front and center. So thank you for
Yep.
pulling it up and reminding me. And there it is. You just candidate selection process. We've got a good 3-part process. Step 1 is just done online there. Step 2 is the background check and the vetting. And we're looking for quality candidates in every single riding. We're actually putting together a political party, Laura-Lynn. It's not just an entity that asks people for their money. It takes a lot of work to build a political party. And I'm pretty proud of our team that in a year that I struggled with cancer, and we have a small child that we devote a lot of our time to, in that year, we've got a team, we've established a board of directors. We've got a constitution with a mission statement and principles. You know, Laura-Lynn, from your federal political experience, some of these parties take them a long time to just get a simple constitution. It's not so simple. We've got that. We've got riding associations in almost every riding in Ontario except for 8 registered. We've got thousands of donors and members. We've got a New Blue Ontario Fund, which is our not-for-profit fundraising arm, which gets an audit every year. We're building something of substance that's going to go into June and past June, because there's no redeeming the Ontario PC Party, Laura-Lynn, and we believe the best is yet to come. We're going to keep pushing forward and making a difference.
I believe for that as well. Let's talk again, and it's been so good to see you. You're looking good, and we're just praying that complete healing, complete wholeness from all that stuff that's happened in the past. And, you know, all the trauma you've been through with your body and also in politics, whatever doesn't kill us makes us stronger. And for sure, you are one of the strongest people that I know. And so I hope that you do well. And also to Belinda, give her our love. Tell her that there is a group that are giving her a standing ovation every time she stands and gets knocked off by how they're treating her. Unbelievable. We are just so proud of her, and we're so proud of the both of you. And I hope for great days ahead, Jim. Thank you so
Thank you,
much for
Laura-Lynn.
spending time. Thank you.
Thank you for your time, Laura-Lynn. Thank you very
All
much,
right.
and God bless you.
Take care, Jim. God bless.